Joining me now is David Henderson. He's a civil rights attorney and former prosecutor, and Joe Ested. He is a former police officer in Richmond, Virginia, for us. Joe, what kind of impact will this executive order actually have?
Absolutely nothing. It will not do anything to correct police brutality, which is the real issue. You can't have a recommendation to fixing police. That's not going to work. The police entities operate within their own culture. They've been doing it for many, many years. We need real legislations that's going to stop, that's going to punish. In my book, Police Brutality Matters, I gave recommendations. And if people in Congress really want to stop this police brutality issue, I'll be more than happy to volunteer my services. What we need to do is we need to understand the root of the problem. A lot of these recommendations, a lot of departments already have that in policy. We could take Officer Pantaleo, who choked out Eric Garner. There's policy that says you don't do that. But the problem is they're not being punished. They're not being held accountable when they violate policy. So since the police department don't want to hold them accountable, then we need legislation that's going to prosecute, that's going to convict officers when they don't follow procedures and don't follow policies. I drafted a whole list of recommendations that I know, working from the inside out in the culture of policing, that would just wipe away police brutality. We got to stop playing games and understand what the real issue is.
David, what did you think about what you
Yes,
heard
ma'am.
the president announce?
I haven't had the chance to take a look at the executive order on paper yet, but based on what I heard, I am disappointed. I think it is a slap in the face of everyone who's been out protesting around the world for the past several weeks. I think it's a slap in the face of those who have lost their lives, whether we're talking about Minneapolis, Atlanta, or right here in Dallas, Texas. And I think it's a slap in the face of those who mourn the loved ones that they have lost. I base that on 10 years working daily with law enforcement. This executive order will not change anything, and right now the public is asking for meaningful change. This is not it.
And then what does it say, David, where, for instance, we had initial reporting that the president might include guidelines that would limit the use of chokeholds, and then we don't hear him talk about that? What does that signal? And look, I think there are a number of policies where we've heard President Trump, even sometimes on foreign policy, he'll essentially have a policy and then he doesn't quite describe it the same way as he's messaging it. But what is the effect of there even perhaps being a discrepancy there?
The effect is a complete lack of any meaningful change. In order to change the culture of policing in our country, we're going to have to change the way we assess police conduct. Right now, it always turns on what the officer believes is reasonable and not what is actually reasonable. I didn't hear any discussion about that at all, but I think that idea is really hard for people to understand sometimes, so I'd like to use a common sense example. There's a notorious story in my family of me kicking a soccer ball through a church window. When my mom showed up, she said, "What happened?" And I said, "I didn't mean to." Her response was, "You didn't mean to, but you should have known better." And if you look at qualified immunity and we put it in that language, I would have told my mom, "I thought the way I kicked the soccer ball was reasonable." And my mom would have said, "It doesn't matter. It wasn't actually reasonable." And qualified immunity prevents us from having that full discussion. As soon as a police officer says, "I thought what I did was reasonable," even though someone's dead, the conversation stops. That's why we need measures that are going to actually hold officers accountable when they use excessive force.
Can we talk, Joe, just to this idea of incentivizing? Basically, you know, that is not having negative consequences, but emphasizing the positive consequences for doing things correctly, but not as much the negative consequences for doing things incorrectly. And look, lives hang in the balance here. So what do you think about that?
I think that's ineffective. It's not going to work. If you allow the police department to pretty much do what it's been doing, policing itself, and trying to incentivize with good behavior, that's not going to work. The police culture is always going to do exactly what it's going to do until we implement something that's going to say, you know what, if you don't follow the policy, you don't follow the training, we will hold you accountable. And holding you accountable means you commit a crime, you get prosecuted, you go to jail, you go to prison. All it takes is one officer like Officer Pantaleo who violated policy. You send a strong message. Look, we're not playing. We're not playing. You guys, we provide you training. We provide policy. We give you all these tools and measures to go out and serve a community. And when you violate it, there's repercussions from it. I guarantee you that will change the whole mindset of law enforcement.
Yeah, and just a reminder, you mentioned Pantaleo. It took 5 years before he was even fired, so I just want to remind people of that. David Henderson, Joe Ested, thank you so much to both of you for the conversation.